Okay, so welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. Now, if you're a regular listener, you'll know who I am. But if you're listening on another platform, another podcast, possibly because this is being shared to a few websites and a few other people's platforms, then I'll just sort of give you a little bit about me. So I'm obviously a UK-based ultra trail runner. I'm a podcaster. I'm involved in the UK trail running media. I write articles for Run Ultra, which is a website which is similar to Ultra Sign Up in the US. So you obviously understand what that is. I'm involved with the media team that looks after the Spine race. You've probably heard of that race in the UK. I also like to keep up to date with things that are happening around the world in the global trail running community. So I was obviously aware of this issue between Gary Robbins and Coast Mountain Trail Running, and then the announcement from UTMB about their new race, Ultra Trail, Whistler Ultra Trail, being scheduled for obviously the same weekend that WAM, Whistler Alpine Meadows, would normally take place in September. Now, obviously, you know, it's a bit of an understatement to say that this news caused a bit of controversy and a bit of upset in the ultra running world. So I wrote an article about it. I did an interview, podcast interview about it with some industry insiders. We talked about it, who was to blame, try and figure out if anyone was to blame and whose fault it was. I then put a post on Instagram that talked about social media possibly being a bit of an echo chamber for your own ideas. Maybe things you may be misconstrued. Maybe we're getting the wrong end of the stick by the things that we're seeing. Obviously, everyone's upset, but have we heard properly from the other side of the story? So I put this post out, and actually, Ultra Trail, Whistler Ultra Trail, UTMB. Reached out to me and said that they'd done this open letter, and I read the open letter and I said, well, how about you in person, somebody come on my podcast and speak about this issue and try and get to the bottom of it, find out what actually happened and hear their side of the story. So the Ironman PR department got in touch, and here we are, today's podcast. So I'm going to do my best to try and represent the global sport of trail and ultra running. Forgive me if I get things wrong. I'm from the UK. I don't know everything about everything around the world, but I'm going to do my best to defend trail running in the community and sort of put over how upset everyone has been by what's happened. So hopefully we find some answers. We'll see. So we'll find out at the end of this podcast. Okay, we are recording. So welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. Now, I have a few people to talk to tonight. So normally it's only just one person or two at the most, but there's possibly going to be three. We'll see how Colby feels about being part of the podcast. But firstly, I need you guys to sort of introduce yourselves individually, who you work for and what your roles are in that job. So if you take it in turns, just to introduce yourselves.
Sure. Thanks, Sam, and appreciate the time. My name is Paul Huddle. I'm the Senior Director of Global Trail Running for Ironman.
Excellent.
Sam, thanks for having us on. I'm Keats Mcgonigal, Vice President of Operations for the Ironman Group in North America. Been with Ironman for 15 years now. And obviously excited about the conversation this evening.
Yeah, excellent. Right. So we'll dive straight into it then. So obviously this podcast has come about because of this it seems to be ongoing debate about what actually happens with WAM and this new race that UTMB is putting on in Whistler. Now, I wrote about it in an article for Run Ultra, which is a website in the UK, which is similar to Ultra Sign Up. So that kind of thing. There's articles on there and races are on there. And I've also interviewed a few people from the industry sort of to get their opinions on it. And obviously social media at times can can be a bit of an echo chamber, shall we say, for we don't always get to hear both sides of the story. So basically that's where I want to begin. So can you sort of give us, I know it's a broad question, but can you give us your side of the story of what actually happened with WAM and UTMB?
Yeah, I'll let Huddle start. He started some of the conversations early on, and then I'll chime in with my side. So Huddle, why don't you start with some of the first conversation?
Yeah, sure. So my initial contact with Gary and Jeff was middle of November of 2022. And it was because we had interest in their Squamish 50 event and wanted to see if they were interested in being, part of UTMB. And so that conversation went well. And so we signed an NDA at the end of December. I think it was December 20th, to continue the conversation. And then in the end of January as a company, and I understand I'm probably in the middle of 20 conversations at this point globally, 4 of which were in Canada with different event groups, looking to partner and expand our UTMB events. And at that time, at the end of January, for a variety of reasons, the company said, hey, just put the acquisitions on hold for a moment. And so I let all of those conversations know, hey, we're just going to put the brakes on it for a second here. Conversation's definitely not dead. We want to continue the conversation, but for a variety of internal reasons, we're going to hold on acquisitions. And then I think February 11th is when we saw the very public announcement of the parting of ways between WAM and Whistler Blackcomb. And it was at that time, because we've had a long relationship with that community via our Ironman event there, of which Keats was the original race director in 2012, is when we all looked at each other and said, hey, maybe we should contact them if there's sort of this event has gone away, maybe we should see if they're interested in bringing a UTMB event. And that's when I think Keats, a little bit after that time, made his initial contact, and I'll let Keats pick up the conversation from there.
Yeah, so I'll start from more than a decade ago. So I was our original race director for Ironman Canada in Whistler. That goes back to 2012. So I've been working in Whistler, know the community, know a bunch of the people there for a number of years. Super cool spot, and so when I saw that that WAM was no longer, and the public post that Gary put out that said he's no longer going to do business in Whistler, I just reached out to my contacts that I had up there, and I said, hey, are you interested in having a conversation on potentially hosting a different trail race? So I reached out to the Resort Municipality of Whistler, which is essentially their version of the city, or their government entity. And they said, yeah, we're open to a conversation, fill out the new event form that we have, that we ask all new events to go through, and went through the process that way with them.
So is this just a case of seeing an opportunity for a race and taking it, basically?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is an area where I've been going there for years, and I've run on these trails, and they're amazing. And we saw a void that was left for the trail running community, and said essentially, hey, this void exists. If we can have the opportunity to fill the void, why not? It's an amazing place, great mountains, great running. We can deliver a great experience for the participants. Let's at least have the conversations and see where it goes. So that was kind of the impetus for us, or for me specifically, reaching out to the contacts that I had there.
So this sort of angle that Gary is sort of speaking about, that he had a contact with, is it Vale, is it, that that looks after all of that, was basically ghosted by them for a number of months, to the point where communication completely broke down with them, and it got to the point where, as you will know, you need a certain amount of time to put a race on. It got to the point. So his view was that somebody was in the background not giving them the permissions, and it was almost like they were pushed out. So this is the feeling that he's got, was that the race was sort of in behind the scenes. Somebody has sort of said, don't give them the permissions, don't let it drag out, and eventually they'll give up. How do you feel about that sort of allegation, that it was sort of behind the scenes, things have been maneuvered so that that was there?
Yeah, so just to be 100% clear, Vail is the owner for Whistler Blackcomb, which is the resort, right? Or is the ski mountain that, that exists there. I can't speak to what happened prior to my involvement, or the communication or lack thereof between Gary and Whistler Blackcomb and any of that. All I can share is our side and how it actually played out, in terms of the fact that, so I reached out to the city, who connected us with Tourism Whistler, which is the tourism agency. And we had conversations with them, and then we actually didn't get a formal response or make initial contact with Whistler Blackcomb directly until months into this process. So I don't end up getting an introduction with them until May, and then a response in June, months later, before we even have any interaction with anybody at Whistler Blackcomb. So I can't speak to how it went down, but I can say confidently that we were not involved in any back channel negotiations, or telling anybody to make any decisions on permits or anything like that. That, again, Gary is entitled to his perspective and his own thinking on how it went down, but we were never involved with any conversations with Whistler Blackcomb until months into this process, and months after he had come out publicly and said he's not hosting the event.
So there was a definite distinction of time between when things ended with Gary, and then when you guys came in. There was a period of time where there was no overlap, as far as you know.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, and we have all of the email documentation. My email went to again, the resort municipality of Whistler days after there was news articles that came out that said that WAM was no longer going to be there. And it was, again, just an initial reach out to somebody that I had done business with for more than 10 years and said, hey, are you interested in a conversation? And they said, sure, you can choose to go through a new event application process just like everybody else. So we submitted the online form. They have a group there locally that reviews those things. They said, yes, like, we're interested in a conversation, but ultimately you're going to need to talk to Whistler Blackcomb. I said, great, make the introduction to the right people. And it went from there. But, that process, like I said, it took months before we even had any interactions directly with Whistler Blackcomb.
So the sort of question that a lot of people have been asking is, if that, if that's how things happened, why that weekend? Why keep that same weekend that the WAM races were going to be on? It's almost like, obviously you're aware of people's feelings about it globally in the running community. They're sort of saying it's almost like sticking the knife in, sort of thing, to Gary and people that have supported that race, that it's that same weekend. Why couldn't you have picked any other weekend in the year?
Yeah, great question, and certainly a valid question. Ultimately for us, we were negotiating essentially 3 different calendars, right? So it was our calendar from a UTMB perspective, and not wanting to host events on same weekends that we already have. It was Whistler as a community and the events that they have existing there, and then the calendar for Whistler Blackcomb in terms of what they have on the mountain and the mountain operations. And ultimately, for us, we were told by the resort municipality of Whistler and Tourism Whistler that basically during the main part of the summer months, they're already busy, they're already full. And so, they basically said, you can't have any dates in July, you can't have any dates in August, which left the September calendar available. Obviously, as you get into October, November, you're dealing with snow, and the high alpine mountains there. And so we'd kind of taken those off. Whistler hosts a series of different events in early September. So they have a big Gran Fondo bike race, they have a beer fest, they have other things. And so between the 3 calendars, essentially the only option that was available for us was the last weekend of September. So it wasn't like we were intentionally targeting that. It was essentially just lining up the calendars and saying what's available. And that was the last one that was there. The other piece of the conversations that we had, as a group, was knowing that the Squamish 50 was in August, trying to get as far away from that date as we could, knowing that, that would be a perfect, if somebody's going to do 100K at the end of September, running a 50K in the middle of August is a perfect training opportunity, to be able to run a 50K in August and then come back and be ready for 100K later in September. So that ultimately is why we ended up on the date where we did.
So it was a calendar issue.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean, and again, Whistler Blackcomb already had existing events in September. They do an Everesting event, where people are hiking up to the top and then riding the chairlifts back down repeatedly over a weekend. So that had, that was in there and took a weekend. So, they have an Xterra mountain bike race at that time, in September. So like, again, looking at all of the different factors and events, it was essentially the available weekend locally.
Okay. Sort of in hindsight, with all of the, the hoo-ha that's happened since the announcement, do you have any regrets about making that announcement and about picking that weekend? Do you still feel like it was the right decision, or do you feel like things should have been different, or possibly different?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, we were certainly, I was personally caught off guard by the level of animosity that we received and I personally received, and the emails that are coming is, it's surprising to me as somebody who's been in the event industry for, more than 15 years. Generally, people are positive and upbeat and support each other and things like that. So to personally feel the level of angst that is directed at me personally has been hard. And so, if I knew then what I know now, would I have done it differently? 100%, right? Like, the process by which we would have gone through this would have been very, very different. again, I see it as ultimately a void was created, and I reached out to people that I worked with for, more than a decade and said, hey, are you guys interested in working together again? So I think, that was the piece that caught us off guard. Would the process have been different? Should it have been different? Yes, absolutely. But unfortunately, what's done is done. So, we can't go back and change that.
And I suppose, it's your job you're a race organizer. It made sense that there's an opportunity there, a window of time. You're scheduling a race. So it seems like a logical thing. Were you aware of how, does it sort of change your opinion on how on your view of how people in the community view UTMB and Ironman? Has it sort of changed? Were you aware of the strong feelings towards, because this seems to have brought out everyone's feelings about big corporations, because Ironman is viewed in trail running as a bit of a big corporate entity, and UTMB in the same way. How do you feel about those opinions of you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, and then Huddle, if you want to chime in, because you're seeing this more on a broader global basis. I mean, I think ultimately our goal is to deliver great runner experiences, right? And I've been fortunate enough to be at a number of our UTMB events, in the last couple of years, and the energy and the vibe has been really positive and good. I mean, even shortly before this announcement, we were at the Kodiak event in Big Bear, and people loved it and had a great time and turned out. And I mean, I think that was kind of the positive vibe and feeling that we've been feeling, and we're expected, moving forward, that people would be excited about going to Whistler and experiencing one of the coolest ski areas in all of North America, right? They're amazing trails. So I think there still exists that positive energy and vibe at a number of our other events. So I think that, this is again part of why it caught us a little bit off guard. But Huddle, you can speak from a more global perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Keats just said, and it has been hard, but it's also something, as Keats has been in this for 15 years. I think I've been in it for 20, 25 years, and, was on the ground with our brand new events in North America for Ironman when we didn't have anything in North America at that point. And so I've been through that process. Same in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and then now with UTMB. And I think it's somewhat normal and natural to hold Ironman and or UTMB as this somewhat abstract idea and very easy to hate, right? Because they're this corporation, et cetera. But what I think gets lost often in that is it's a group of people, and it's a group of people who really care deeply about endurance sports and care deeply about the communities, the athletes, the partners, everybody involved. I mean, that's why I've been in this so long. And I did leave for a few years. I got tired of it. But the positive, in my opinion, outweighs the negative. So while I understand the feeling, I also, as Keats just said, feel completely differently on the ground at an event. Every event I've been to, and all of our event organizers, by the way, are amazing. They are the core of what we do. Every race director, and I've been a race director for a lot of years, in my past. So I feel like we have a really good grasp and handle on the importance of those relationships in every single community. And I think if you spoke to any of our existing events, whether it's Chaz and his team at Canyons or Carl Meltzer at Speedgoat, any of them, I think they will tell you that their event, as much as they all still love their events as their babies, like every event director I've ever known, and myself included, feels. And we don't ever want that to change. And that's why when we talk about this with people, we want to keep that, and we want to make sure those event teams are in place and that we don't change anything. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation I've heard on podcasts and otherwise. But I guess my feeling is, again, it's that abstraction of Ironman or UTMB or whatever it is separate from human beings. And it's been, as Keith said, it's been incredibly painful, because I think we all take this personally, and we feel very responsible, not just for the brand, but for our event teams and anybody else who has to suffer as a result of this. And in particular, in this case, Michelle and Katrine Poletti, who, came up with this whole thing and established the values 10 years ago with a group of them sitting around the table about what needs to happen at each event. And I feel like we at Ironman have shared that, and we've always made it a really important component of everything we do to give back to each of those event communities. And I think we've proven that. And I think if you ask again, our existing new UTMB events, the give back in those communities has gone up in every single case since they've become a UTMB event. So that's all I can say. And I think Keats and I have both been trying to respond to every single email that's come in, and every media request as well. But I also realize there are those who you're not going to sway them, and there's no way to sway them. They're going to hate the big company no matter what. And I understand that. I'm a human being too, and I have those feelings about certain companies in the world. But I also think that, again, the positive way outweighs any of the negative that I've experienced in this sport. And I feel terrible for this whole thing. And as Keith said, of course, in hindsight, knowing what we know now, yeah. And to me, it's really communication, and maybe that might have been different, knowing what we know. So,
do you think the sort of, you'll know this sort of from the global point of view, were you sort of aware of any sort of ill feelings towards UTMB as being this before this? Did this magnify it, or did you know that there was this ill feeling towards? Because I'm just thinking about Ironman, and when you guys got involved with UTMB, I did a podcast with Dylan Bowman from the US, and we talked about the pros and the cons of money coming into the sport, the professionalization of the sport. But there was always that kind of fear that people had that UTMB and Ironman were going to sort of come in and take over everything. Are you aware of that feeling that people have, that Ironman, UTMB sort of now represent like big pharma, big endurance, that I've heard people say that this week, that they're kind of put on this like pedestal as being, everyone thought that they were coming in bringing money and spotlight to the sport, which obviously has happened, which is great. But people are sort of fearful that every small mum and pop race is going to get taken over by UTMB and sort of ruin everything on a grassroots level. How do you feel about that view that people have? Because they do have that view.
Sure, I'll give you my 2 cents and let Keats chime in on that. But of course, we're aware of that. And I think if you've been a part of Ironman for any length of time, you have felt that throughout that time. Again, I don't know, quantitatively or, from an evidence point of view, show me, because I think we're always really interested in knowing what are the things that we're not doing well, and we want to make those things better. And again, speak to the folks who are on the ground or who have partnered with us to work on those events. I understand it, again, from an abstract point of view, but I don't think it's realistic, because, we, and when I say we, all of us, including Keats and I, come from independent events that we owned and operated. And as owning triathlons back in the day, I saw nothing but benefit from Ironman growing, because the sprint and Olympic distance races that I was a part of grew from that, because people it was suddenly like, wow, Ironman, this is cool. I want to do this. I want to get involved. And I think it's similar in trail. I think UTMB has helped in the same way that the Golden Trail Series has helped, in the same way that this new World Trail Major, I think, will help grow and grow the sport. And for me, that is the ultimate goal, is to get people out on the trails and get people to experience off-road running. And I've been through this in the past, in San Diego County, when we were trying to be part of a series of shorter races, granted, and more cross-country style, but getting people to experience how different and in a better way running off-road is. So that to me is the ultimate goal. But yes, I understand the sentiment. I just feel like it's often misplaced because of the perception of the size and scope of either Ironman or UTMB. And I've heard a lot of interesting and almost humorous to me, like, comments like, UTMB is so big now because they have more money than Ironman. And it's like, these UTMB events are very small in terms of scale and in terms of, overall finance. I mean, it's anyone who's put on a trail race or a running race or a 5K knows how hard it is to make it pencil. You know what I mean? So I think it's a little misplaced. But anyway, Keats, I don't know if you have comments about your feelings about, because it's normal, right? And it's something we always get. And what I always feel like is, I can't do anything about the haters. All I can do is try to focus on delivering the best possible experience for the runners, the community, the volunteers, the partners, everybody, and keep my focus there, and don't worry about all the noise, and just do the best I can.
I know, sorry, Keats, before you sort of jump in.
Okay.
As a trail runner, my sort of feelings on it, I came from triathlon. So, I started doing like a sprint triathlons probably I've been running for about 20 years, but sprint triathlons probably about 15 years ago, something like that, and worked my way up to, I never did an Ironman event, but I got up to the Ironman the full distance and did that a couple of times. And then kids came along and didn't have as much time to train. So I picked the one sport.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
I picked the sport that I thought had the most bang for the buck, which was running, and I stuck to that and sort of worked my way up in ultras. But that's, the two sports feel very different to me, and maybe this is the sort of quandary that people have in the trail running community, is that Ironman kind of represented something very different to trail running to me, because of how the grassroots feeling of running on trails and it being about community and, pair of trainers, sneakers, and off you go, and you run with your friends. Whereas when I was doing triathlon, it didn't feel that same community. I had friends that I talked to about it, but it felt like it was more of a materialistic kind of, and I think this is maybe where this feeling comes from with the big corporate thing, is that it was about having, a really, not an expensive wetsuit, but having a really good wetsuit, and about having having a really good bike, which would obviously equals expensive. And I was a young family man. I spent quite a bit of money building a time trial bike for myself so that I could use that for races. And in the end, once I'd sort of transitioned out of triathlon and got into trail running and ultra running, I sold that time trial bike, and it paid for a holiday for all four of us to Greece. And I used to use the spending money as well. That's how much I spent on that bike. And it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect between triathlon, Ironman, and trail running, UTMB. So when the two came together, I think a lot of people in the community kind of sort of felt like it was a mismatch, like there wasn't, the values of trail running and the values of triathlon don't always seem to go together. And I think maybe that's probably what people are kind of resisting, is that Ironman represents big corporate money. Trail running isn't about that. Trail running is about grassroots and it being almost like family. Do you feel that is a fair comparison to sort of make.
I understand why that comparison's to make, but I don't think it's fair, because I think if you look at all of the companies involved in trail running, and if you look at the elite athletes involved in trail running, and if you look at what each of these entities is trying to do, they're all trying to make money. They're all trying to make a living. And, you know, you bring up Dylan Bowman, great example. I love Dylan's podcast, and I love the guy, honestly. And I've only been familiar with him for the last 2.5, 3 years, listening to Free Trail and all the good things he does. But you'll notice on that podcast, he's got a running shoe brand. He's got a nutrition brand. He's got all the things that anybody in endurance sport who's trying to make it has. So it's exactly the same. But both of these sports, whether it's triathlon or trail running, has a very deep and historic and extensive grassroots base. And that's what every sport, I think, comes from. And look, you're talking to a guy who started triathlon in 1980. Okay. No helmets, no clipless pedals, no everything, right? I mean, very, very at that level, and has watched the evolution of it. And to me, it's normal business evolution. And I've watched it, by the way, in surfing as well. I took up surfing in the 80s, and I watched surfers not be very welcoming to newcomers in the water because we're cooks. We don't know how to surf yet. And it feels a lot like that to me. It's like, we're here, we're the core, we're authentic, you're not, go away. And that's what it feels like. And is, on the other hand, I love this space because I did Western in 1997, and I love trail running. I feel like I wasted most of my running in triathlon and in collegiate running because now my knees don't work that well and I can't do it, but I do hike. I love being on trails. But yes, I understand it, but it's not, I don't think it's real. You know, there's room for everybody, and there's always going to be grassroots events. And I will always love and never want any of those grassroots events to disappear, because again, I feel like we all have the ability to one another up. I mean, I'm as excited about races like Sierras and all of them, you know, sky racing, it's all different. It's all, no one's taking over. Everyone has a unique thing. And I do think that what Michelle and Katrine created around Mont Blanc is really unique and incredibly popular for a lot of very good reasons. And all we're doing is trying to give people the opportunity, more people the opportunity to get there, whether they're in Asia, in Oceania, in North America, because frankly, right now it's a desert for opportunities to get to UTMB. And that's sort of been our goal, is to facilitate that. But again, everybody is trying to make money and make a living, and we're trying to help and raise that profile. We're trying to institute a real anti-doping program. We're trying to do a lot of things that I don't feel like we tell the story well enough about, but I also feel like we don't need to. It's like, instead of talking about what we're doing, let's just do it. Instead of talking about the benefits we're bringing, the greater benefits as events have become part of our series to those communities, don't talk about it, do it. You know what I mean? Instead of talking about $50,000 donated to trail restoration in the mosquito fire at Western States, just do it. We did it. You know what I mean? Do we need to beat our chests about it? No, because that's what we do at Ironman with all of our events and all of our communities globally. So, you know, I was raised that charity shouldn't be something that you brag about. You're charitable because you care and you give back. So
that's really interesting that you say that, because, you know, I'm not aware of that. People, I'd imagine there's a lot of people in trail running that aren't aware of that. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're missing a trick. Maybe you do need to tell people that that's what you're doing.
But again, think about it, Sam. If you're UTMB or Ironman and you go around beating your chest about, look what we're doing, look at all this great stuff we're doing, how is that received? I've learned over the last 2 weeks, you know, social media is a really nasty place, and it's really easy to be negative behind a keyboard rather than, I think Keats probably has experienced this too. Everyone I've talked to has been really great. They may not agree at the end of the conversation, but it's been really nice to talk to people and get those perspectives and hear from them and have them hear from us. And so again, I appreciate this opportunity, but the social media thing has been really rough. And I told my wife, I said, now I understand in a much clearer and not even close, maybe deep way, but a much clearer way, how bullying must be for kids, in schools who are on social media, how just getting, people just being really ugly unnecessarily and not, I don't know. But again, on the ground, and I've told everyone at every race, this sport and this being on dirt, I've been on dirt for the last, 15 years on a mountain bike, and I love dirt because this, because you came from triathlon and now you're in trail running. It's a different feeling. It's a completely different vibe. It's people are really not I don't want to say forgiving, but they're just out there to experience it and be part of a community, and it feels really great. I always give the example, we were sorting gear bags after canyons in 22, and I know we needed to have them, according to the schedule, ready by 9 a.m. And one of the trucks hadn't gotten back from one of the distant aid stations and had just gotten there, and we were unloading and sorting. And I was thinking, oh my God, what if athletes start showing up now? We're not ready. And a couple of athletes showed up, and I was like, oh my God. I'm like, hey guys, we're not really ready, but we're sorting and expecting to hear, why aren't you ready? You guys said you'd be ready. And what I heard was, do you guys need some help? Can we help you? And it's like, I'm like, there you go. That's why I love this space and how refreshing it is to be a part of it.
But maybe I think it would be in your favor, publicity wise, PR wise, not to be put it in everybody's faces and say this is what we're doing, but just subtly somehow let people know that you are giving back to that grassroots community, because the feeling that people have is that you're coming in and taking all these grassroots events and you're taking them over, making them corporate. So could this be a way of letting people see, the softer side of UTMB Ironman? Do you think that could be an option for you to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think our Ironman, on the Ironman side, it's a much more mature foundation. It started as something called the Community Fund, and it became the Ironman Foundation. And I think they do a really good job about telling that story and making it available to everybody and letting people know how they can become involved in that. And we just literally, UTMB Cares just was launched last year, and it's just getting off the ground. And we're trying to figure out how to incorporate that. There's different tax laws globally, right? You can't donate as an American to UTMB in France and get a tax benefit from that. That's an important thing for some people. So we're trying to get that all together. And no, it's not perfect yet. No, we haven't gotten it all wired. But yes, absolutely, that's something we're in the process of doing. With regard to telling the story, yeah, I think you're right. I think it is something we need to do, but we need to figure out how to do it in a way that maybe isn't, whatever you want to say, offensive, because I know some people take offense to it. It's like, you're not doing enough. And look, you'll never do enough. I'll never do enough personally with my community to give back. So you try and give back as you can within the constraints of your life, and that's all you can do, So, but yeah, I think you're right. There's something there for sure. And again, I've been blabbing away. I want Keats a chance to chime in on the Ironman hate story, because I know he's been a part of that, and it's for us, it feels very normal these days. But I think communication is a key.
Keats.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of Ironman or UTMB coming in and taking over is a little bit of a misconception. In 2024, we're going to have 6 events in all of North America. Like, there's 6 events, and there's dozens of event producers out there who will have more than 6 events, right? Like, so, to characterize that we're taking over all of the events, I think is a little bit of a characterization. Ultimately for us, we want the grassroots events to be successful, to be something that people go and participate in, right? Some people want the opportunity to go chase running stones and qualify to go to Chamonix. Others don't, and that's totally fine, right? Like, we want the local events to do really well and be successful and get more people running on the trails. And, it's our position that when all events are successful, then everybody's successful, right? And if we can use collectively our mouthpiece to encourage other people to go run on trails, and they do that, and, you know, they go out and they find some local trails and they run a local 5K, and enjoy it and keep doing that, then that's a win for us, right? Like, whether they come to our events or other people's events, you know, like, in some ways it doesn't matter, because we're about delivering great experiences, right? And that's what we want to do. And if that means that somebody has a great experience at another local grassroots event or another company, then but more power to them, right? Like, that's, you know, I think that's what makes the community so cool and unique and special, is we can have a shared experience, even if it's not on the same trails at the same day, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think, sorry, I just want to interject the phrase takeover. And I've heard that a lot, right? Takeover, even hostile takeover. And I just want to point out, everybody who we've partnered with, which I think is a much better phrase, has come to us, or if we've come to them and said, are you interested? They've either said, no, we're not interested. And we've gone, great, you know, keep doing what you do. Awesome. Or they've said, yeah, we're actually really interested. It's not a takeover. It's an agreement. And it's, you know, so I just want to point that out. We're definitely not interested in taking over. We want to be wanted. And I think, you know, we want communities that want us, and we want to be in those communities and help those communities to thrive, you know, in whatever way we can. So.
Yeah, and there's an expression in the tide, is it tide raises all the ships in the harbor?
Yeah. Exactly right.
That's
Rising
what we're
tides
about.
lift all boats.
Yep.
Sorry, Keats, you were saying?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what, you know, what we're about. And, you know, again, it's been discussed that Gary is looking to host another event, you know, in British Columbia somewhere on the same weekend that we're hosting Ultra Trail Whistler. And, you know, we wish him the best. We wish the runners that go and support that event the best. You know, we hope that it's hugely successful, and, you know, and he sells out and does well, right? Like, there's no ill feelings towards any event producer. Like, I know how hard it is to do these things, and, you know, I want them all to be successful.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the feeling's mutual, and everyone just want everybody to get along. So finally, then, sort of, how can UTMB and Ironman move on from this? So, leaving this all behind, and I know you want to forget about this and move on. How have you discussed internally how you can move forward from this, you know, the ill feeling that hopefully is going to die off? How do you feel like you got a plan in place to try and move things forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts by listening to the community, right? Like, taking the emails and the phone calls and hearing everyone's perspective, right? I mean, I think that's how community works, whether it's trail community or, you know, in my neighborhood, right? Like, if you have issues with people, talking about it, hearing their perspective, listening, you know, saying, hey, like, you hurt me. Okay, well, how did we hurt you? And, you know, we can apologize for those things that we're aware of, and hear people out, and then, you know, try to make things right and make them better, right? You know, so we're doing that on a one-on-one basis now. You know, as we move into more planning for the event in Whistler, we're going to do some community meetings related to that and continue to listen and hear, you know, what is it that you guys want? You know, how can we support this community? As Huddle has said, you know, it's our full intent, and has always been our full intent, to give back to the local community in Whistler, like we had when we were hosting Ironman Canada there, right? And hearing what are the key projects and trail development issues and trail maintenance issues, and running group support type of things that we can do to make that happen. So ultimately for us, it's about engaging the community, listening, having dialogue, and then trying to have a positive impact on it moving forward.
Yeah, Paul, how do you feel about moving forward?
Yeah, exactly what Keith said. I think the key word for me in all of this has been communication. And so making sure that we are communicating, and as Keith said, both listening and having the ability to meet with people one-on-one, face-to-face, via phone, via conference, or in person, and talk. I mean, I think that's probably the most important part. And I think that's often what gets that sort of abstraction of its Ironman or its UTMB as sort of this entity as opposed to people. And so I think that's going to be really key moving forward.
I love how every time you say Ironman, you raise your fist. You've got
well, it's like that entity, like the entity of UTMB. It's like just this thing in the clouds, right? That is out there. But yeah, I don't mean to do that. I just that's a good one.
Yeah, well, I'm appreciative of you guys responding, because I've been sort of in the industry, working in bits of media and everything like that, and putting posts on, and I was trying to put an unbiased perspective out. So my article I wrote for Run Ultra was unbiased, and the podcast I previously did with two people from the running industry, we talked about it and it was unbiased. So my post that I put out was sort of the question of, we've heard everybody, lots of people shouting about this, why haven't we heard from you guys? And I know you put out the open letter to sort of, put your guys' angle out on things. So when somebody from the Whistler Ultra Trail replied to my story, I was really impressed that you guys had actually reached out to somebody, because I'm not high profile in the industry. I just keep plugging away and doing my thing. So I was really appreciative of you guys sort of on that level, sort of making contact and arranging this. And I thought it won't go anywhere, but it was nice to see an email pop up with Ironman PR department coming through. And I thought, all credit to you guys for listening, listening to the community on this subject. So, my opinion now is that, I didn't really have a strong opinion before, but now I can sort of see your side of things, how there was an opportunity there. You jumped on an opportunity, probably didn't realize the upset that it would cause, but there's not a lot you can do now other than, like you say, move forwards, address issues with the community, do your best to give back to them. And there's not a lot more that you can sort of be said about it, is there?
No, I think you're right. I think you made reference, I can't remember what the word was, but to high level or lofty or whatever the reference was to either mine or Keats or Ironman or UTMB status. And I really feel strongly that this is a really tiny sport, and it's way too small to be this divided. And I wish people would step back and just look with some perspective at just the overarching sport and what's going to be best for the growth of it and how it grows. And I think we're all concerned about that, and we all want to do the best by it. But again, our focus is 100% on athlete, community, volunteer, partner experience, and we just want to do a good job with that and help grow the sport. So yeah, I think I appreciate what you just said there, and all we can do is to continue to do what we do. And I don't know, I think Keats is on the same page. It's like, just focus on delivering the best experience we can for everyone involved.
Final thoughts, Keats?
I mean, I think the piece for me and Sam, I think what you just shared about us reaching out is important in terms of we want this to be the start of the dialogue, but not necessarily the end of the dialogue, right? And part of how we continue to engage with the community is not have this just be a one-off conversation, right? But as we go into 2024, having more dialogue on our other events, right? And what we're doing with canyons and Speed Goat and some of the other events, and not have this just be a flash in the pan of the conversation, but have something that is ongoing and positive and contributory towards raising the entire trail running community, right? So I hope, while this is the first of our conversations, I hope this is not the last of our conversations.
Excellent. Well, much appreciated. I appreciate you giving your time up. I know it was all a bit, not last minute, but we got it together quickly, didn't we? So I appreciate you both giving up your time and coming on to talk about it, and look forward to seeing, you know, what happens in the future. And I hope, for everybody's sake, that everyone can get on and just get on with the sport that we love, which is, you know, running. Let's get on with it. So thanks, guys.
Great.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate
it.
Thanks for what you do.
Cheers.
Cheers.